Hello friends, this video on diversity in living organisms part 5 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Look at evolution in order to understand what are these more basic characteristics. So what is evolution basically? The name says evolution. The evolution term has actually come from evolve. What is evolve? Evolve means, for example, we say that this problem evolved out of this cause. So that means something developing from something else. That is known as evolve. So evolution is the process of development of complex organisms from simpler organisms with time. So the concept of evolution says that the complex organisms which we see around us today, they have all developed from simpler organisms. So with time, the simpler organisms gave rise to complex organisms. So it sounds quite weird, right? Because we can never imagine that we human beings, we have got quite complex body structure and organization, right? So we can never imagine that maybe we have evolved out of some other organisms. That sounds so unbelievable and weird, right? So the mythology says that God created all life forms that we see on earth. But do you think that God would have created each of this so many living organisms which we see on earth? It is not like that. Maybe God created the first one and all others gradually evolved from that first one. So that is what would have happened in the process of evolution eventually. So now we will understand evolution. So it is seen that when the earth was formed, there was no life on it actually. It is not that when earth was there, life was also there. So initially there was no life on earth because there was no oxygen on earth. And you know that how badly every life form needs oxygen to survive, right? So there was no life on earth. But then gradually with passage of time, life started evolving on earth. So initially there were only simpler forms of life or simple organisms with simple body structure, and gradually complex life forms started coming up. So here you can see this table or this picture which actually tells how life formed. So here you can see this is the time scale. This 0 denotes the present time. So in the present time we have the modern looking humans. So this is our present time. So as we go down the past, you can see that long back, the formation of earth, then first signs of life, and then we have some eukaryotes, then we have complex multicellular life, then animals, land plants, mammals, and then later modern looking humans. So actually there were so many different life forms. So everything came one after another. So it started with some simple cells which were not organized into tissues and organs and organ systems. It's just simple cells. So some life forms of that form came up. Then came up something called cyanobacteria. We will talk about that. Then came up little complex cells, not that simple as before. Again, multicellular life, where not only one cell, but you have so many cells and all those cells perform different functions. Then you started seeing simple animals. From them you had fishes, land plants, insects, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds, primates, apes, and then finally humans. So humans are amongst the complex structures or the complex living organisms. Right? So this is known as evolution. That means with the passage of time, the simple organisms only give rise to the complex organisms. Now I'm very sure that even with this explanation, you would not have been satisfied. That how is it possible that, and because in a way I'm trying to say that the first life which was there, the very simple cells, they only gradually gave rise to the human beings which we see now. So I'm sure it is quite unbelievable for you that how is that possible? Not directly, but they gradually keep on giving complex organisms, and then finally we ended up in humans. So I will give you some examples which will actually illustrate this phenomenon of evolution. So if you look at this example, you can see that how evolution, or how with passage of time you give rise to more and more complex and developed organisms. So maybe it all started with nothing but a single cell like structure. What exactly was the first life form? That nobody knows. There are a lot of controversies. Some people say that bacteria was the first life form on earth. Some people say that it was something like a single cell, but there is but it was not exactly bacteria. But whatever it is, so initially maybe it was nothing but a cell-like structure or some cyanobacterias. So from there came up the simple prokaryotic cell, where in the prokaryote, what are the prokaryote cells? Prokaryotes are the one where you do not have different specific cell organelles, right? Because now that you have studied about cell, you all know what is an eukaryotic cell and what is a prokaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cell is the one where you do not have distinct cell organelles. So everything is scattered inside the cell. But eukaryotic cell is the one where you have specific cell organelles, which are all membrane bound and they perform their specific function. So I'll not discuss about prokaryotes and eukaryotes in detail, because I have already spoken about them when we talked about, when we learned the lesson on cell, the fundamental unit of life, right? So then from them came up some simpler microorganisms, maybe then came up amoeba, then came up some organisms like paramecium. So gradually with time, we had some reptile-like structures, we had some animals, we had this monkeys, from there we have the apes. And you see, you just look at this transformation. So gradually the transformation is taking the shape of the present human being, right? So this is how actually evolution would have taken place, right? So that means there are some basic characteristics which are in common between all the life forms. So there has to be some basic characteristics based on which we can classify these organisms, because everything have come up from the same basic thing, right? So let us now look at some examples which will actually illustrate this phenomenon of evolution, that how complex organisms develop from simpler organisms. So here if you see on the screen, you can see a cell here, right? The starting point is a cell. Right? So actually there are a lot of controversies as to what was the very first life form on this earth. Because some people say that it was bacteria which was the first life form, whereas some other people say that no, it was not bacteria exactly, it was something else which was nothing but a simple cell. So let the controversies be there. Let us assume that it was nothing but some simple cell. So from either it was that simple cell or it was this cyanobacteria. What was cyanobacteria? We will talk about them as we go ahead. So from there we came up with simpler organisms, that is the simpler prokaryotes. What are prokaryotes? We talked about the two types of organisms based on the cell which they possess, that is prokaryotes and eukaryotes. What are prokaryotes? Where we do not have specific cell organelles. That means inside the cell, everything is scattered out. We don't have specific membrane bound cell organelles. Whereas in case of eukaryotes, we have specific cell organelles which are all membrane bound, right? So here initially we saw prokaryotes. So from prokaryotes, several microorganisms came into picture, be it bacteria or be it amoeba. So here you can see them. So be it amoeba or these simple organisms like paramecium. So you will get to know about all of them as we go ahead with the lesson. So here what I'm trying to say is how simple things started becoming complicated. So gradually we got organisms like fishes, we got this amphibians like frogs, and then lizards. So if you look at them very clearly, you can see that even though they look very different, but there is a possibility that things can arise from different things. So gradually you can see that we got animals like monkeys. From monkeys we found a little more advanced types, right? So from that we came to apes, who were almost very similar to human beings, and finally we arrived at human beings. So by looking at this picture, you can get an idea how things developed and how simple things started becoming complicated. And that is how we reached where we are today. So this is how evolution takes place. And this is how evolution is also related to the basis of classification. As I said, what should be the basis of classifying so many variety of organisms? It has to be some basic characteristics, right? So how do we know what are the basic characteristics when the things look so different? Do they actually have anything basic in common? Yes, they do have, because all of them share the same ancestor, right? Okay, now you must be wondering in your mind that how is it possible that we get complex things or we get different things from the simpler organisms. So let us look at another type of example. Let us look at this family here. So if you look at this family, let us say this is the husband and this is his wife. So this couple gave birth to these two kids. So if you look at this picture, you see that this man has got black hair. The lady has got golden brown hair. Now when you look at their kids, one of their kids have hair which is similar to the mom, but one of the kids have hair which is black and is similar to his dad. So that means the kid inherited this property from his dad. Right? So it is true not only for this family, it is true for all of us, right? Many of us look like our dad. Many of us look very similar to our moms. But is it that whatever features we have, that has to tally either with our mom or with our dad? We also do have some characteristics which is neither similar to our mom nor similar to our dad. It is something which is of our own. So the same thing happens everywhere. So in this case also, if you look at these two kids, I told you the example of their hair, right? Now if you look at this kid, he has got big eyes and he has got blue eyes. But if you look at his parents, none of them has got blue eyes. But this kid has blue eyes. So this characteristic is something which is of his own. It was not there in his parents, but now he has it. So now when he has it, there is a possibility that when he grows, when he become young and he gets married to somebody, so his kids might have this blue eyes. So the feature or the characteristic of blue eyes, which was not present in the family, is now present. So now you will have more people in this family in the coming generation with blue eyes. But blue eyes was something which was not existing from before. Right? So similarly, this is how actually changes happen. This is how the changes start happening. Right? So even in this picture, you can see that this couple had this kid. So if you look at this kid has got a round face very similar to his dad. So he has inherited this from his dad. But at the same time, there are characteristics which belong to this kid himself, which is not present in either his mom or in his dad. Correct? So what I'm trying to explain is that how evolution takes place or how changes take place. Changes take place like this. Because whenever a child is born, he will have some characteristics of the mother, some characteristics of the father, and some characteristics of his own. So the characteristics which is of his own are the new characteristics which were not present before. So they get carried over again to the next generations. And this is how the changes or the evolution had taken place in the past as well. Right? So I think I'm able to give you a rough idea of evolution. However, we'll be studying about evolution in detail in class 10th. But for now, you should get this much idea in your mind that what is evolution and how is evolution related to classification. Because we should not divert our focus from what we are going to study now. Right now, our aim is to study about classification of living organisms. So I don't want to distract myself. So just gave you an idea of evolution to make you understand that how evolution is related to classification and how evolution tells us that there has to be some basic characteristics depending on which we can classify the variety of living organisms on Earth. Okay. So this means that whatever we have discussed so far, this actually means that whatever living organisms we see on this earth, they all share a common ancestor. How each of them were developed, we are not sure about that, but we are sure of the fact that they all developed from a common ancestor. So when they all belong to a common ancestor, they had to share some basic properties in common. There has to be some characteristics which we can choose as the basic ones for classifying them, right? So gradually, with passage of time, we got more complex organisms from very simple cell-like organisms. So from very simple organisms like this, you got complex organisms like the lion, the camels, the human beings, or these complicated fishes like whales and sharks, elephants, dogs, monkeys. So we got so many variety of living organisms, right? Okay. So now the question is, so how were the living organisms finally classified? Because the first scientist who wanted to, who gave an attempt to classify organisms, that was Aristotle, he failed because he could not choose the correct basis for classification. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.